Ryan Wilson, CBS Sports NFL Draft Analyst, joining us here. We just had our General Manager, Andrew Berry. He was kind of center stage here for an hour with the availability, and then here with us on the show. Ryan, let's just start big picture with this draft in terms of the talent that's in it. Andrew said, I need elite. We're looking for elite difference makers. How many of those are there?
At number 2, there are a ton.
Yeah.
Travis Hunter is probably the best player in this draft class that's not a quarterback. He's the best player. Teams need quarterbacks. Cleveland could certainly be one of those teams. Abdul Carter, I'm sure you guys have talked a ton about him as a possibility at number 2, especially if Myles Garrett ends up not being in Cleveland next year. Offensive tackle is not quite as deep, especially at the top, but it's defense frequently. Yeah. Edge rush, defensive line. There are going to be some cornerbacks in this class. If you need a running back, and we'll see what happens with Nick Chubb and the depth there, you can get guys all the way through day 3. So everything but quarterback is pretty much on the table. And I know, obviously, the Browns have some things to figure out at 2 and what they want to do there. I feel like a lot of these teams wish they could get a time machine, go back to last year's draft class for the quarterbacks. Yeah. But, it's going to be Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders, and they're going to have to figure out how high those guys end up going.
When you look at Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders, what do you like about Cam? What do you like about Shedeur?
So Cam Ward is he's my QB1. He's a little bit bigger. He's a little bit faster, a little bit more athletic, a little bigger arm than Shedeur. So literally every box you check. And he's gotten better each and every year. Played at Incarnate Word, went to Washington State, made improvements there. And when you talk to scouts over the summer, coming out of Washington State, he was probably a day 3 guy. And he made a huge leap this year. Now, the lack of depth at the quarterback position probably helped push him up. But he dragged that Miami team to a lot of wins, which otherwise they would not have had. The concern with both Cam and Shedeur is the same concern I had with Caleb last year, in that they play a lot of hero ball because they sort of have to. The offensive line of Colorado was a mess. And when you start playing outside of structure, it's fun for college. It doesn't really translate to the NFL. It took Caleb what felt like 2.5 months to figure that out, and finally things started to come together for him towards the end of his rookie season. In terms of Shedeur, I liken him physically, not necessarily as a player, but physically to Joe Burrow when Joe Burrow transferred from Ohio State to LSU. Mm-hmm. And I remember talking to Joe Burrow just over here 4 or 5 years ago when he came out, and I said, when did it finally click for you to do the things you were able to do your final year at LSU? And he said, mentally I could always do those things. Physically my body had to grow into what I wanted to do. We'll see if Shedeur is going to do that, but I think physically he's not the athlete that Cam is. He doesn't have the arm that Cam does. And then you're sort of dealing at the margins when you're a team trying to figure out how this quarterback fits, because he can't make the throws that Cam can make, or Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen or whomever. So you're going to have to tailor the offense to sort of exploit what Shedeur does well. Now, I don't know if there's a tougher person in college football than Shedeur Sanders, and I talked to a ton of his teammates during the All-Star games, and they said to a person, every time he got hit in the mouth, he didn't point fingers, he got back up, got in the huddle, called the play, and went on to make the next play. And I appreciate that about him. But I do wonder, and part of me is a little concerned, that all the sort of Sanders hype around him is going to affect how we view him, at least media-wise. And sometimes that seeps into how the teams, when they interact with these players, how they end up judging these guys ultimately.
When you judge quarterbacks, because you hit on it, these circumstances are so different. And one of the things, Nathan, when you did the deep dive on Shedeur, was like you never saw a single time when he pointed like or went like this on the protection. The protection was awful. It was awful.
Killed.
And they had no run game. I mean, none. Didn't even attempt to run it. It was like a kid playing the video game, honestly. Like, we're going to throw it 50 times, and we'll throw it to Trav a lot, and that's the way it's going to go. What are you looking for as you're analyzing quarterbacks specifically? How do you weigh like how they are when it all goes well versus off schedule? How do you weigh all of that when you're because look, we were here last year, we talked to a bunch of people. I can't remember if we had you on or not. We talked to a bunch of scouts. It felt like Caleb, and then a big drop for Jaden and Drake, and then who knows after that. So, and then all of a sudden now we get there and it's like, well, they're all really good, maybe potentially, maybe Penix too. So how do you kind of try to find your truth at quarterback?
Yeah, Beau, I'm smiling because I've been covering the draft since 2019 for CBS, and what I come away with is that we don't know. Like we don't know.
Right.
To your point about Jaden Daniels and even Bo Nix, hey, guess what, guys? Fit matters. And if you go to a situation, Washington's situation 12 months ago was a disaster, and they were starting to make the changes, but they nailed the draft even after Jaden Daniels. Sean Payton, it turns out, knows what he's doing with young quarterbacks, and Bo Nix was the exact right player they need. Is Bo Nix Jaden Daniels? No, but he does a lot of what Sean wants him to do, and I think that's incredibly important because you're going to have a ton of failure as a quarterback, as a rookie in the NFL, and it's a matter of how you deal with that mentally. We were talking to Brian Callahan earlier today, the second-year coach for the Titans, and he talked about how he was in Cincinnati when they drafted Joe Burrow, how mentally tough you have to be to play that position, because you guys see it. You've gone through a slew of quarterbacks because of injury and otherwise, and you can tell when a guy's body language isn't where it needs to be. And to your point, Nathan, about Shedeur, never seen him point. I think if his name was Sam Johnson, we wouldn't worry about any of the other stuff that we talk about, and I get why we talk about it. But I think more than the physical stuff, and I don't want to bag on this young man, but I bring him up as an example. You build Will Levis in a lab for quarterbacks, but you could see the frustration and sometimes the body language work against him last year, especially when he ended up getting benched. And that's what you have to figure out. And the teams haven't figured it out yet. I certainly haven't figured it out, and that's the toughest part.
When you are evaluating quarterbacks, because I would, in my assessment of them, I think Cam has more talent, more upside for what we ask a quarterback to do, and what I would say a McVay or a Shanahan or even a Kevin O'Connell.
Right.
I like Shedeur's decision-making, his accuracy, his toughness to stay in the pocket, that if it's in structure and you can maybe get some of those habits that he developed because he was behind such a bad offensive line out of him, that you have somebody who can be a real kind of a sniper assassin in that style of an offense. So I think both of them have an opportunity to win. When you look, what are the traits that you look for the most? Because, when you talked about the box with Cam, those were all physical. But as we know, the game is not played at that position physically alone. Right. You have to have not only the ability to decipher and process information quickly, know where to go with the ball, but then the ability to deliver it on time accurately and have that kind of anticipation, that almost instinct that is not really a tangible thing, but it becomes tangible on tape.
Absolutely. And I think mentally physical tools have to be there, but after that, and 1A, maybe even 1 comma, is the mental toughness to overcome. It's sort of like what we talk about with cornerbacks, where you have to have a short-term memory. You can't keep making the same mistake over again, but you have to learn from those mistakes quickly. The processing is incredibly important. And the thing with Cam that I love, and almost to a fault, again, Will Levis, frenetic comes to mind when you think about Will. He's always tight and moving around, sort of jittery. Cam is the exact opposite.
Nonchalant.
He is as laissez-faire as they come. It's almost
I wrote that in my notes, 1 billion. I'm like, nonchalant, just nonchalant.
Like he's sitting in a rocking chair playing Madden.
Yep.
And you're like, all right, speed it up. But he always seems to get the ball out on time. His subtle pocket movement is pretty good. Like, he has a sense for players around him. He still has to get the ball out on time more. But the development I saw over the course of his career is encouraging. It feels like in the interviews that I've seen, we haven't talked to him yet, he's not going to take anything from anyone.
No.
And he's talked to people at Washington State and at Miami. Both said he's an incredible, quiet confidence leader. So he's not a rah-rah guy, and he doesn't necessarily have to be. But all the things point to him being able to have success.
How do you evaluate a guy? Because what struck me with Cam was unbelievable talented, can throw it literally to anywhere on the field from basically any base, any arm angle.
Exactly.
And will sometimes put himself in strange bases for really no reason. It's just kind of that nonchalant thing. You could, in my mind, I wrote one of the things I wrote down. You could tell he's a fan of Mahomes and like Lamar Jackson, because he does a lot of things mannerism-wise that are similar to them. But one thing that drives NFL coaches crazy, and we've certainly dealt with it at times with the Browns, when you won't take the layups. Like in the NFL, it is so hard to even scheme up somebody open for 7 yards that when it's there, you have to take it. And Cam, part of the hero ball, which to me was a little bit different than Shedeur, was that sometimes he'd have perfectly good protection. He'd have somebody open for 12 yards. He'd look at him and be like, that kind of bores me.
Yep.
I'm going to drift, and I'm going to throw a 30 or 40-yarder. Is that something that how do you kind of evaluate that evolution into the NFL? Because it's going to have to be something that's coached out of him and that he's willing to at times do. And now some coaches may say, you know what, I'll live with you missing a couple of these because you're going to hit me. I wrote that he's a chunk play machine. You're going to hit 30, 40 here, and that's going to make up for it.
And the Cal game comes to mind where he had some throws, and you thought he had never played football before. Some of the things he was trying to do with the football and throwing across his body 30, 40 yards. One was an interception.
Yeah, a pick six like early in that one.
You're like, wait a second. Are we watching the same game on the same planet? But I think that's where someone like Kevin Stefanski comes in. And it's funny, as an outside national media person, and you forget, the Browns won 11 games in 2023, didn't they?
Yeah, that's right.
And Kevin
we haven't
Stefanski
forgotten.
Was the coach of the year.
For the second time.
Second time, yeah.
For the second time.
I think he's so underrated because people just want to focus on the negative, and I understand all the storylines around that. But his ability to get the most out of that offense under sometimes trying circumstances. And my buddy Rick Spielman, who I used to work with and suddenly quit the podcast to go take a job with the Jets, whatever, he worked with Kevin in Minnesota, and he speaks incredibly highly of him. I was talking to my buddy last night who's in the league and said he's one of the best offensive minds in the game, and I think you can't undersell that because, again, fit matters. Cliff Kingsbury worked with Jaden last year, and we saw the success they had. Sean Payton and Beau Nix, like I mentioned. And I think if you get a quarterback in there, a young quarterback who's interested and focused, like someone like Cam seems to be, that feels like a pretty good starting point.
Yeah, not to mention Kevin, but Tommy Reese, who was the OC that
Tommy
clearly
Reese.
got more out of Jalen Milroe 2 years ago at Alabama than they were able to once he left.
Yeah, with Kalen DeBoer, who did what he did with Michael Penix Jr., and you were hoping to see more from Jalen Milroe. But I don't think that's a number 2 overall conversation, so we don't have to have that. But I think I sometimes lose sight of the fact, me personally, of how important you can put players with teams, but the infrastructure has to be in place. And the Browns have some offensive line issues to sort out, some wide receiver issues to sort out. But if you have a good base, and by that I mean a coach who can get the most out of his players, especially at quarterback, and you have someone like Cam who seems to be bought in and more confidence than you have to worry about, that seems like a good place to start if that's what you're going to do at number 2.
Talking to Ryan Wilson, CBS Sports NFL draft analyst. Get you out of here on this one because Nathan and I are proponent for 2 and more at quarterback. Take 1 at 2, take 1 in the third round too. Is there a guy, a mid-round guy that you like that jumps out at quarterback?
And I love that philosophy, by the way. We made fun of Washington when they did it with Kirk Cousins and RG3.
Just fine.
As many at-bats as possible.
Absolutely, because you don't have I say it, if you have 21 Hall of Famers and no quarterback, you're not winning playoff games. So absolutely.
Can we put you on the payroll? Like, that's all.
Nothing else matters.
We've been saying this for a month and a half.
Nothing else
Like,
matters.
that's it.
It's
Like,
not.
You don't have a
complicated.
quarterback. What are you doing?
A year ago, I was a big Spencer Rattler fan, and this year, Kyle McCord's my guy.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think he's probably day 2, day 3 fringe right now, but he had such a fantastic season. And you guys saw him,
Yeah.
and you know the evolution this young man made. And me personally, I think it's the big fish to little pond transformation that allowed him. And we talked to him in the Shrine Bowl, and he said, I had a lot more confidence. I was throwing with anticipation. He had a fantastic season. And that final game against Cam, if you didn't know who was who, you wouldn't know who the best quarterback was because they went toe-to-toe. So I think he could be a day 2/day 3 option. I think he's going to have a good week.
He lied, but not because he knew I was going to do this. He was being honest. He was getting you out of here, but I'm saying no. One more.
Yeah.
We are of the belief that this is a league in which you must score the football. You want to be competitive. You look at the teams who went to the playoffs, top 12 scoring teams all went to the playoffs last year. So we're in our minds, we're all on board. Quarterback, get a quarterback early. Let's go. Pick 33. The Browns have the first pick in the second round. This is a valuable pick. Who are some of your favorite weapons? And I'm going to use that word now. I used to be more, it has to be a receiver, but now with the way tight ends can be weapons and even the way we're seeing, running backs come up. And I'm reminded that we did get Nick Chubb around that spot back in 2018. Who would be some of your favorite weapons that could be available to the Cleveland Browns at pick 33?
Yeah, Omarion Hampton, the UNC running back, I love. He's
home run hitter.
Going to be a round 2-ish guy, it feels like. I don't know if he'll be here, but Matthew Golden, the wide receiver out of Texas, he had a fantastic season. Houston transfer. He's a track guy. We'll see if he goes a little bit higher than that. But Jordan Addison was my comp for him, and Jordan Addison's he's pretty successful. Tight end wise, I like Gunnar Helm out of Texas. I don't know if that's a little too rich. Mason Taylor out of LSU.
What about when I watched Cam, I fell in love with that tight end.
Elijah Arroyo is also.
Is that too early for him?
He's going to be a day 2 guy, and teams like him a little bit more than I do. But I think he's a day 2 guy. Athletic, he looks the part. A little bit like the Njoku thing coming out. So
how about Gibbe's guy from Gibbe went to Bowling Green?
Harold Fannin Jr. First of all, we talk about the smaller school guys playing against bigger competition. He crushed Texas A&M and Penn State.
And ran away from him.
And the greatest thing about Harold Fannin Jr., and I don't know what Jason feels about this, is it looks like he doesn't have knees. He runs weird, but he's fast. It's the weirdest thing. Like he
kind of moves like Gates a little bit.
He has
that weird
right.
way where it's like weird. It doesn't even look like he's moving, but he's moving.
It's like a Fred Flintstone run. His feet are moving, but he somehow he's a playmaker too. I think he's a day 2 guy, and we'll see how he tests because he's not an inline guy, so you're going to move him around, and that's okay if you understand that. But
absolutely,
I think Kevin Stefanski probably figured that out.
Yeah.
Right. Ryan, can't thank you enough. Really enjoyed it.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for the conversation. Ryan Wilson, CBS Sports, joining us here at the NFL Scouting Combine in Indianapolis. You're listening to Cleveland Browns Daily on 850 ESPN Cleveland.